tell you a little bit about the work, first of all, and its origin and everything. I can't really believe it, but I was thinking about this. It's almost 15 years that I've been working with this particular subject matter in terms of a mythology that is created around an area here in South Louisiana, and that area is Lake Buff. Now, Lake Buff is geographically a real place and its environment and everything, but it is also, I think, and more importantly as far as I'm concerned, it's a place of the mind and the imagination. And that mind and imagination has wandered over these 15 years quite a bit in terms of creating these particular creatures that are both in their own way significant, not only because of what the real animals they represent are all about, but also I think they're metaphors for our behavior as well. And I think that's probably just as important, if not more so, than the way in which these have been thought about at this point. The ones that are represented here in terms of this collection is a group that I call rugas. And rugas are that darker side of this Lake Buff environment. And they include all of those creatures that have claws and fins and fur, teeth, and that sort of thing. They're on that lower echelon in terms of the way in which they utilize this environment in which they live. This cypress is about 200 years old, okay? And you can tell that if you would see the pieces in terms of the growth rings and that sort of thing. But as a consequence of that, this wood, this cypress, although it's a very soft wood, it's for this particular cypress, it's a bit stronger and more dense than cypress that's new grown. And that's the difference here. I also incorporated some other aspects into these pieces by this bamboo that I use. I love using bamboo. It's a wonderful material for it to be a grass related to just the grass out here on the lawn is something very interesting. As you know, they use it quite a bit in China to even do scaffolding for buildings that they're putting up and that sort of thing. So it's tremendously strong and also, I think, rather attractive in the way it grows. And so a lot of the portions of these pieces also have that incorporated into them. The two on the ends here also involve using the very roots of this snag that was there. And I think that contributed somewhat to the ideas and the way in which the materials are used. Lake Buff is a really kind of interesting place in many respects. We were talking about this earlier because particularly the gators that are there and that sort of thing do a lot of this display in terms of what we would really call standing, because in order through the cycle of mating and that sort of thing, they need to draw attention both to themselves and then in some cases when they're nesting to draw attention away from them. And so at night in particular there, this becomes a really sort of eerie sort of place in the fact that whether it's a foggy night and that sort of thing, or a lot of times even with a full moon and that sort of thing, the shadows that are created make a lot of difference. And so that was one of the important things in putting these pieces together, to not only look at the pieces themselves, but the shadows that they create. You'd be surprised how surprising that can be if you're in a boat going out in to Lake Buff and around in the trenances that are adjacent to it. And it really makes a difference. You can hear the sounds that these animals make, because even on the nest, and even though they're standing, the sounds that they make and that kind of thing not only reverberate through the air, but also under the water. And so that kind of sound, and also the sight of these things. Many times when you go out, if you're shining a light out in here, as you know, the eyes reflect red, and so there can be a whole area that is just filled with these red eyes out in front of you that gets to be pretty eerie in its own way. And so that's the story behind these. In terms of the technique and that sort of thing, these are put together extensively and without any nails. Okay, they're just there's glue and dowels to put all of it together. And the way in which these are finished, I used to, when I carved and that kind of thing early on in my career and everything had to be very slick and smooth and that sort of thing. And I found in that I lost a lot of the quality that is inherent in the material. And so that's when I first started leaving some of the roughness in terms of the texture and that sort of thing with the materials. And so you might want to note that as you look at the colors and that sort of thing. I am not, although the collages that I do also in conjunction with all of this, they have lots of color to them, and I like that aspect of them. And but as far as the sculpture is concerned, most of those are just either, if they're metal, they're lightly patinaed or colored. With this, I like the material itself to create the color that's involved, and I think it registers as a lot more what the pieces are about by doing that, rather than adding an extra aspect of color to them. So I don't know if that explains very well what's going on here, but I hope it does. And if you have questions about these, please ask. Yes.
No, I don't think Wednesday night I would have noticed the shadows. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the darker pieces of wood, that's been left pretty much in the raw
yes.
form.
And those are parts of the snag that were actually the roots of it, root material, which is a bit different in terms of the way the wood is for these cuts for the legs and for a lot of the body parts of them as well.
Oh, the contrast is really nice.
Yes.
Do you have to treat the wood or varnish it or anything?
This is just lightly sprayed, just to seal it enough. I like the wood to breathe, because you have to realize that sealing it off completely is not a good idea. It needs to have that, but just in order to keep the oil of the hand or dust or that kind of thing from getting into the grain of it, I coated it with a light spray of sealer.
When you're working on these, you work on just one, or do you have more than
No,
one going?
I work on all of them as I'm working on them.
Okay.
And, I generated all the legs for these to begin with, and then in starting with these, and then just kept working on each piece as I would go. The Gorilla Glue is great stuff, I have to tell you.
So do you glue it all first, Mike, and then you peg it, or do
No,
you peg as you
in
go?
combination, pegging
It's a
it
bit-
as I go, and
okay.
that strengthens the whole piece.
Gotcha.
In terms of when you finally get around to the finish of it. And a lot of these things, the pieces are actually fitted to where they go, and so I've got to cut them and carve them in such a way that they'll,
Do you make
together.
sketches prior to building them?
I do, not in terms of what these finished pieces are, but in terms of just being able
General outline.
to, and that sort of
idea.
thing. There's some similar ones in terms of the collages that are on the website for the gallery here. You can take a look at those. There are some red-legged ones that are on the website, and it's ruby red legs, and they are the night is falling, and so I have this blue paper that's been put as though it's like the sky falling down. So you have to check those out, and those have a greenish yellow color to the head and the top portion of the body. So you need to take a look at those. That will give you an idea of what the color is involved in as far as these pieces are concerned. This is all called the L-bag drawings, collages, and sculpture is what this whole body of work is about, and what it's labeled, as a matter of fact. So, yes.
This is probably a wild oversimplification, but do you think of these creatures, your creatures, as being fearsome, fearful, somewhere in between?
Well, I would like for them to have not only that quality to them to some degree, but more important, I think the whimsy of them is something that can be enjoyed in them, even in these, that are that darker side, if you will. But that's the idea of it, that they are, just like the rest of this environment, they are an integral part of it, and that's an integral part as far as I think we're concerned. If we don't have that or use that quality, it's all to our detriment, I think. You have other questions? Yes?
Did you make this while you were looking at them, or did you just make them from memory?
I'm sorry?
Did
Say
you
it
make
again?
them while you were looking at them, or did you make them from memory?
Did you sketch them or take a picture?
Oh, no, I drew them, I drew some of them, and then I made them, yes.
So these are invented?
Yes,
So,
right.
Do you have a dictionary of all your creatures' names, types of creatures and everything?
That's a great idea. I haven't really thought very much about that, but that would help. One of my ultimate goals is I love limericks, and I've thought often about creating some children's books that utilize these guys, and so that's one of the goals I've got. And, yeah, that would be neat.